Well, Klaus Jurgens is a political analyst who joins me now from Vienna to talk more about this. Good to have you with us, Klaus. So we know the vote is non-binding. The Turkish Prime Minister says it's not important. But what impact is this going to have on Turkey-EU relations?
Yes, hello, good evening from Vienna. Good to be on your program. I think this vote is one final point in a long series of misrepresentations, of misunderstandings the European Parliament has tried to put forward vis-à-vis modern Turkey. I'm not singling out any particular person, but we all know that the report was basically drafted by one person in particular, who was very, very outspoken about continuing Turkey's EU accession talks at this moment. I know a number of European politicians, member of parliament. I am shell-shocked by what happened. It is a summary, if I am very blunt and very outspoken, which I take my journalistic liberty. I think this is playground politics taken to the absolute maximum at the time when the Republic of Turkey needs support from its European allies and partners. Turkey hosts over 3 million refugees, is a role model for humanitarian aid, has just overcome a failed military coup attempt almost 1 year ago, and the European Parliament has got nothing better to do to vote on closing the door to the Republic of Turkey. I'm lost for words.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting position because less than 2 years ago, Ankara signed the refugee agreement with the Europeans. The position was completely different in terms of the EU accession talks. What seems to have happened in the last 2 years?
Honestly, I would need a crystal ball. Turkey agreed to the migrant deal, but in return had what one would call very limited demands from her own side. One was to speed up the EU accession process, and the other one was to grant visa liberalization for 6 months business and tourist visas. Now, the EU was backtracking first on the visa deal, complaining about the terror law has not been in line with EU policies. And now all of a sudden, the European Parliament apparently wants to completely freeze EU accession talks. I would say luckily, without in any way being derogatory towards members of the European Parliament, I would say luckily it has advisory function. It is not the executive body of the European Union. I hope that the European Commission, that the member states will sit together and just don't close the door towards one of its most important future members. And this is not only about the migrant deal. This is not only about visa liberalization. This is about, will the European Union become a multicultural, a multi-faith global player, or will it simply one day disappear into a Europe of 2 or 3 or 4 speeds? And by that time, probably the Turkish people have a right to look elsewhere. But I'm very sad to say it like this.
Yeah,
I'm hoping the two sides come together.
I was going to say,
I'm really hoping.
Talking about looking elsewhere, I mean, you know, Turkey has proved itself very adept at making other relationships. We've seen that it's able to cooperate with Russia. It's obviously helping out Qatar right now. So do you think Turkey could pivot away from Europe?
No. Honestly, I have been living and working with brief interruptions for over a decade in the Republic of Turkey. And if the Turkish people are good for many things, for one thing in particular, they have perseverance. They will not easily close the door themselves towards Europe, but they want something in return. And if nothing comes in return, they have a right to look elsewhere. But honestly, I think there is no serious alternative to the European Union. Today I checked, of course, what the Turkish government issued in response to this unfaithful European Parliament vote. It makes clear which side wants to continue the accession talks, which side wants to continue the reform process, greatly facilitated by the EU and its funding, of course. But there is no doubt that the Turkish side is not closing the door towards Brussels. It seems that one of the 3 key actors, the European Parliament, the European Commission and the European Council, unfortunately, one of them did just that today. I hope the two sides come together. Turkey did what it could, and but as President Erdogan said, repeatedly said, and rightly so, if I may say with all modesty, if again another year and another year passes and Turkey does everything to get ready for EU membership, and at the same time the European Union simply disregards all of these efforts, wants to belittle Turkey, wants to teach Turkey another democracy lesson, having no clue what happened after the Gezi Park protests, what happened last year with the luckily failed coup attempt, having no clue how Turkey is coming to terms with what happened last 15th, 16th of July, and they're still criticizing it for whatever it does, then there might be a day indeed where even
this is a problem for Turkey, though, isn't it? But as you say, all of these issues that have affected Turkey, but it is, it is having to do some work in reassuring Europe over cracking down on opposition or human rights record. Is Turkey prepared to do more to give these kind of reassurances? And should it have to?
Well, of course, I'm in no position to talk for the Turkish government, but as commentator, I would say the Turkish side is definitely prepared to do more. What the European side must understand, that this was not a normal intervention in Turkish politics last July, but this was basically an attempt to topple not only a democratically elected government, but to topple an entire democracy, an entire state. And it took time to come to terms with it. I'm not judging, I'm not in the judiciary, and I can't comment on any processes or procedures or trials. But I think the Turkish side would very easily be convinced to sit down with the European partners if they have justifiable criticism, fair criticism, which would then, like you and me are talking now, you sit at the table and the European side would say, this point is against our values, but what is your opinion? Then the Turkish side would say, we have to deal with this and this and this. I think the two sides can come together so easily. The Minister for European Affairs made very, very compromising, in a positive sense, to make a compromise, not compromising statements. The Prime Minister today, the President himself, the business groups, civil society, no one wants to lose Europe. And everyone in Turkey knows that the actual reform process, which started over a decade ago, is still ongoing. It is work in progress. I'm pretty much sure, or at least with all my modesty as a Turkey commentator, I think the Turkey side knows this as well. The project is not yet 100% complete. But now closing the door, it would completely destroy the positive momentum the EU had for so many years in Turkey. And I really hope that this can be avoided. You asked, is the Turkish side ready for this? I'm pretty much certain it is. But it needs a few positive signs from Brussels and Strasbourg and Luxembourg as well. And what happened in the European Parliament, honestly, and leaders of the big European political parties, at least two of them, declaring Turkey should not continue its accession talks. It is not ready for the European Union. Ladies and gentlemen, roll up your sleeves, go to Turkey, and if you think something is not ready, help them.
Some good points there. Klaus, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Klaus Jurgens there, live from Vienna.